All right, so we find ourselves in very interesting times, not just, of course, in the world, but also in the Jewish calendar, because as you all know, right now we are celebrating, commemorating the 10 days of repentance, the 10 days that began on Rosh Hashanah and will culminate on Yom Kippur. And I'm reminded of the story. Actually, the United Nations that is holding its annual presentation reminded me of the story, but Rouhani, the president of Iran, dies. When he dies, he goes up to the angel that welcomes him to heaven, and the angel says to the president, he says to him, yes, how can I help you? Rouhani says, well, yeah, I know that this is the entrance to heaven or hell, but I have a quick question before we even begin the procedure. I see that behind you, he tells the angel, there are many different types of clocks. Can you explain to me what those clocks are? The angel says, yeah, not a problem. You see, these clocks are the clocks of every single human being in the world. And each time they move, that means that they lie. Yes, the clock of Moses never moved, he never lied. Yes, the clock of Albert Einstein, it moved twice, he lied twice. I'd like to believe that. Lied twice. Alright, here's the clock of someone else, he lied 17 times. Rouhani says, great, where's my clock? And the angel says, I'm sorry, it's not here. So he says, what do you mean it's not here? The angel says, oh, that clock I use as a fan in my room. but speaking, I don't know if you saw the address of Benjamin Netanyahu a few days ago. I think it was brilliant. But speaking of the world event, speaking about again the Jewish calendar, I think we really have to reflect as to who we are, where we are going, and more importantly, how do the heavens see us? Now, I don't mean to speak about the journey of the soul after life. Maybe that'll be dedicated for a different lecture. But I'd like to focus on a very specific Talmudic passage that teaches us that that very angel that welcomes us after death is an angel that also asks us 4 separate questions. These are the most important questions before we can even begin to go to paradise and so on. What are those 4 questions? Question number 1 is whether we were faithful in our negotiations. Nasata v'natata ve'emunah in Hebrew. What type of negotiations? Yes, the literal translation is in business negotiations. Whether we were faithful, honest. But there's a deeper commentary to it, and I think that that's again the first step towards self-reflection. Self-reflection that we are immersing ourselves into these very days. What does it mean to be faithful with ourselves? It means whether we were honest in life, to listen to our inner calling. Were we faithful to who we are, to who we ought to be? That's the big question that the angel asked. And I'm reminded of the story you may have heard of a farmer in Great Britain who was extremely poor. And he happened to be walking around his farm one day. His name was Mr. Fleming. And he heard a boy stuck in you know, those sinking sands. They have, you don't have too many of them here in America, but in Great Britain you do. The quicksands, yeah. So that boy was really stuck. And the farmer said, what should I do? Should I be faithful to myself? Should I be faithful to that calling or not? He went and he saved him. Very good. In the evening, he's about to go to bed. He hears a knock on his door. Mr. Fleming opens the door. Who does he see? Someone quite wealthy, quite dignified. And he says to him, how can I help you? And the man at the door says to him, well, you should know I'm the father of that boy that you saved today. I'd like to repay you for your favor. Please allow me to give you this sack of coins. The poor farmer said, no, I'm not accepting any gifts for this. I did what I had to do. I was faithful to that particular moment's calling. The man happened to notice, the wealthy man happened to notice that in Mr. Fleming's home there was a little boy walking around. So the man says, well, Mr. Fleming, if you want to accept the sack of coins, at least allow me to give your boy the same education I'm giving my boy. Let me bring him to the best schools, the best colleges. Mr. Fleming agrees. That boy that he paid for his education turns out to be Alexander Fleming. Alexander Fleming was the inventor of penicillin. Thank you, of penicillin. One day, the son of that wealthy man was very, very sick, fell sick. What was his name? Winston Churchill. What in the story already? Good. Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill. How was he healed? By Alexander Fleming's penicillin. What an unbelievable story. Now, I don't know if it's true, it doesn't say it in the Talmud. It does say on Snopes.com, that website I mentioned in the past, where you can actually authenticate stories. It does say that it is true. But here is a man who listened to the calling of the moment, fulfilled it selflessly, really didn't want any reward for it. And it brought to him much, much benefit, much reward, just because he lived his life fully. You know the famous Hasidic story of Reb Zusha, who was also a very poor Hasidic Jew who took upon himself to not sleep for 2 years, to not sleep in one place for more than one night. He said, I have to take upon myself the suffering of the Jewish people. And whether you believe in that concept or not, that's a different story. But he said, I'm going to go around for 2 years from city to city, and I'll suffer on behalf of the people. Fine. After 2 years, they found him crying. And I asked Zusha, why are you crying? And Zusha said, because I just had an epiphany. What epiphany? And Zusha said, because I realized that when I die, God will not ask me why Zusha wasn't like Abraham or Moses. God will ask me why Zusha wasn't Zusha. And for that I'm crying. Maybe I've been living another person's life until now. So being faithful to yourself, being faithful to everything about you, and to everything around you that is connected to you. And that in and of itself leads us to the second question. The second question that is asked by that angel is Kavata itim la Torah, which means, have you fixed consistent times to study Torah? Consistent times to study Torah. What does that mean? Now yes, Torah learning is extremely important. But I think that the key to this question is not so much in the Torah, yes it is, but it is much more in the consistency. I said to people here before, but I once asked my rabbi, who's a world scholar, truly a world scholar, and maybe the foremost leader in the Jewish world today, Rabbi Einstein also translated the entire Talmud, made it accessible to the public for the first time in 1,000 years. But I once asked him, if you had to condense the message of Judaism into one word, what would it be? What do you think he said? Torah study? No. Mitzvah? No. What?
Strudel.
What?
Strudel.
Strudel? No. That's at least for challah baking? No. No. He said consistency. Consistency. Being a Jew means that you are committed, consistent man. It doesn't matter what. But you have to pick one thing and become consistent with it. You see, it's easy. It's easy to fly into an emotion. It's quite easy. You wake up sometimes in the morning and feel a little spiritual. Not only that, but you have people out there that are one-time wonders. You have sports stars that come into the scene. If you remember Jeremy Lin, remember that point guard, the New York Knicks? Remember him a few years ago? He bursted onto the scene. Where is he today? Houston, man. He was just traded. Houston. But you have people that are like that burst into scene. They're simply not consistent. I'm not saying Jeremy Lin is not a play, but they're simply not consistent. To be a Jew is to take upon yourself one thing. Maybe Torah study or something else. But be consistent with it during the day and during the night, whether you are happy or whether you are not. That is the most important. But going back to Torah study, I'd like to take us to a passage of the Talmud that speaks of King David. It's a fascinating passage, but King David apparently had a conversation one day with God where he wanted to find out exactly when he will die. He told God, please tell me, will I die on the 17th of October, this year? God wouldn't tell him. God said, these are my secrets, not yours. King David persisted. You see, he was consistent too. He persisted, and he said, fine, if you can't tell me the exact date, please tell me the day of the week in which I'll die. God said, fine, that I can give you. He told him you'll die on a Saturday, on a Shabbat. Why did King David desire to know the day of the week? And that is because he had a trick prepared for God. See, from Friday night to Saturday night, during the entire Shabbat, when he knew he might die, he began to study Torah. He wouldn't interrupt himself not for a cup of coffee. He studied non-stop. Because he knew that if you study Torah, the angel of death can't come and touch you. Torah protects you. So he studied Torah every single Saturday, from sunset to nightfall the next day. One day the angel of death had to come and get him. 7 years old, it was time for him to go. So what does he do? He creates this big wind next to David's home. The wind moves the branches of the tree nearby around. King David is distracted, he looks upwards, he interrupts his Torah study, and that's when he gets it, that's when he dies. That's the story of the Talmud, believe it or not. And you can't confirm it on Snopes.com, it's too antique for that. But that's the story. But what does it say? What this is saying now, really moving from the idea of consistency to the idea of Torah study, which is still part of the second question, what this is saying is that, yes, our values and our connection to our values, our intellectual, philosophical connection to our values, the fact that we are binding our very mind, probably the most powerful element in our body, to God Himself, to His words, that serves as a protection for us all. Protection not just from physical death, but from any type of other deaths in the world, spiritual death or spiritual diseases. I think that serves as an island that is protected, that is completely sane, and I dare say even holy. And that holiness in of itself is a shelter for life. It's no wonder, it's really no wonder, I have to add, that when our enemies began to destroy us, they first began to destroy our books. Remember the famous line by Heinrich Heine, the German poet who was Jewish, by the way, late, in the beginning of the 1800s. Heinrich Heine was a German poet who was Jewish at the age of 28 and decided to convert to Christianity. Speaking about forgiveness on Yom Kippur, on his deathbed, he said to his closest people around him, he said, yes, I converted to Christianity, I regret it, but I know now that when I go up to heaven, God will forgive me. It's His job. That's what he said. It is His job. It's God's job to forgive. But Heinrich Heine wrote that famous line in which he said, when they burn books, they will burn people. If you speak German, you'll probably be able to say it in the original language. He was right. Why? Because people know that it is their books, that is their shelter, their protection. Kristallnacht, before the Holocaust, November 9th, in the night between November 9th and November 10th, 1938, they went to burn books because they knew that that's our protection. Once we lose that, we lose our focus, we lose our values, we lose our connection, and then we lose ourselves. That's why it's the second most important question, which we also have to think about during these very days. The third question is asakta b'briya u'via, which means, were you fruitful and did you multiply? Did you have any children? Now, that's why I'm still aiming for a little more. I can stand at least for one question, I can say proudly, yes, I did. But I don't think it refers to just physical children. Really don't. I think it refers to all types of children. Our deeds are our own children. The things that we do, the positive impact we have in the world, creates children, spiritual children, creates good deeds. Children that then enhance the world in many different ways. And when the angel asks us, were you fruitful, and did you multiply? He's really referring to not just, obviously to our children too, but also to our ability to reach out to others. The first two questions were about ourselves. The third question is about our interaction with others, which is as important as the first two. In Judaism, we are called to be engaged. It's quite amazing, but we don't believe in escaping to the loneliest desert and not speaking for many years like monks. We don't believe in that. We believe in our engagement with the world. Yes, from time to time we have to go back and refocus or realign ourselves. But at the end of the day, we really have to be fully engaged with the world. We have to create those children. And I must say that it speaks also of another dimension to that question, speaks also of our ability to create children, first and foremost, within our home. Within our home. To create a base from which other children are created. Because, yes, sometimes with our engagement with the world, we can get lost very easily and forget our base. One of the most important pieces of advice I received in my life is from my rabbi. My dear rabbi who I adore, I love, I revere too. But before I became a rabbi, I said to him, I'm getting into something that I don't really know what it's about. Can you give me any piece of advice if I do in fact become a rabbi? He says, I'll give you a few words of wisdom. But one of them is this: you should never forget your family. Because you'll be immersed with the world, you'll be engaged. But it all comes from the family. It reminded me of the story of a person who was interviewing people. He went to a rabbi. He said to the rabbi, what is the most beautiful thing in the world? The rabbi said, faith. Faith is the most beautiful thing in the world. Of course, that's the answer to expect from a rabbi. Then he went to an artist. He said to the artist, what is the most beautiful thing in your eyes? And the artist says, well, it's love. There's nothing like the romance of a young couple. Love, I think, is the most beautiful thing in the world. And then he went to a soldier. And he asked, soldier, what do you think is the most beautiful thing in the world? What do you think the soldier said? Peace. Peace. I'm sick and tired of wars. Peace. So the man didn't know what to do. He was a painter. He wanted to draw the most beautiful thing in the world, but he was confused. Is it faith? Is it love? Or is it peace? And then he went home. He saw faith in the eyes of his children, love in the eyes of his wife, and he had peace at home. Sometimes we run all around to look for all these novel ideas, but we mustn't forget that it all begins at home. That's why the first conversation recorded in the Bible is not between two strangers. It's between a father and a son. Between a father and a son, later between two brothers. First conversations in the Bible first start with the family. Yes, these conversations are harsh, but still, it's with the family. It all starts there. So it starts there and then it expands. It really must be emphasized, because we live in a world in which the institution of marriage, the institution of families has been broken, also because of other reasons. But the distractions, the overemphasis on trivial things of life seem to shatter our very core. And we mustn't forget that. That's question number 3. Question number 4 that the angel asked is Tzipita Lishua. An interesting question, which means, did you await the redemption? Tzipita, though, in Hebrew is a much stronger word than await. I know that's usually the way it is translated. Tzipita means, did you do something about it? In other words, the redemption won't just come out of nowhere. You have to bring it about. Did you really work towards the redemption of the world? Did you try everything to make this world a better place? Did you tzipita lishua? That's a 4th question. And what this is saying is that, you should never forget to look at the goal. Yes, sometimes we get so immersed in our interaction with the world that we forget the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is really to elevate the entire world. Reminded of the story, and I apologize for the story, but the story of Nathan Sharansky. Nathan Sharansky, who's really a hero of our nation today, and has been a hero of our nation for many decades now. Nathan Sharansky is currently the head of the Jewish agency, right, the Sochnut. I had the privilege of meeting him. He's very shorter than me. You believe that? Shorter than me. I've met many people that are shorter than me. But Nathan Sharansky is short maybe physically, but he's a towering man spiritually. And he came to our consciousness when he was imprisoned. Remember that? Imprisoned in Russia. I don't remember, I was too young. But actually I remember his release in 1986. That I do remember. I don't know if you remember this, but as a side anecdote, do you remember when he was released and all of the TV channels in the world were there at the moment of his release? You saw the KGB officers escorting him and then directing him to the plane that was supposed to take him to Germany and then to Israel. So if you recall, I remember this as a child. Nathan Sharansky was escorted by the KGB officers, and then they point to the plane, and it seemed as if they told Nathan Sharansky, go straight to the plane, and we'll take you to Germany. Nathan Sharansky goes, but instead of going straight to the plane, he walks in zigzags. And I remember the TV people trying to follow his steps as he's walking in zigzag. It was very hard for them. And then I asked him, why did you do that? Why couldn't you just walk straight to the plane? And he answered very proudly, he said, I never listened to a word that these KGB officers told me. They told me to walk straight at the very last moment. You think I listened to them? They told me to walk straight. I walk in a zigzag. But that was his power, his determination, his conviction. But Nathan Sharansky was a man who suffered a tremendous deal in the Gulag in Russia, just because he wanted to move to Israel, just because he was a Zionist. When he was thrown into prison, his wife Avital, who was with him all the way, she was the one lobbying all the leaders of the world during his imprisonment. But Avital left for him a little Tehillim, a book of Psalms. They took it away from him. He went on a hunger strike, and he protested for 3 years in jail to get that book of Psalms back, which he did eventually after 3 long years, but it shows you the stamina the man has. 1986, he was liberated, eventually moved to Israel. In Israel, he became a Knesset member. He was the head of the Russian party, eventually became a minister. Today he's the leader of the Jewish agency. Here's the man who never lost sight of the ultimate goal, of the redemption. He can answer yes proudly to that fourth question. At the very moment he became a minister in the Knesset, if you recall, it just shows you how beautiful God's ways are. But at the very moment there was an uproar in Russia. Why? Because Mikhail Gorbachev, the same man who had imprisoned Sharansky, eventually, of course, changed his ways. But the same man who was the all-powerful leader of Russia was being targeted by the Russian population at the time that Sharansky became a Knesset minister. Why? Because he appeared in a Pizza Hut commercial. It's true, you can YouTube it. Mikhail Gorbachev, this leader of Russia, all of a sudden he becomes a nobody appearing in a Pizza Hut. Gorbachev had dairy. The Russians were extremely upset. But this is how the world walks upside down. Why? Here's a man who really had no goal. Mikhail Gorbachev had no goal. Eventually it was easy to take it away from him, because he had none. Sharansky was a man who had a very clear goal, not just for himself, but for his nation. He was a man that was a true leader. He thought about the whole. And he never lost that side of the goal. Sipita Lishua, he can say yes. And eventually he achieved his dreams. So we can get stuck in the moment, and because life is hard. There's no such thing as a smooth sailing life. But we can stuck and we can have setbacks. We mustn't forget to lose that ultimate, to keep focused, to stay focused on that ultimate goal. You know that I'm comforted, I'm inspired by the model of the daughter of Pharaoh. If you recall, the daughter of Pharaoh was the one that truly saved Moses. In fact, she was the one, according to the Talmud, that named Moses Moses. Moses was not named Moses by his biological mother, by Yocheved. Moses was named Moses by the daughter of Pharaoh, who found him on the Nile River floating after his parents had to give him up because they were coming to kill him. Remember that? Biblical story. What was his name beforehand? Before he was named Moses? Does anyone know? It's tough. It's like a trivia question. But according to the Talmud, his name was Yekutiel. You know the Hebrew name Yekutiel? According to the Talmud, that was his name. Yekutiel. That was his real name. But Moses was named Moses by the daughter of Pharaoh. How does that scene work? If you recall, she was there bathing in the Nile River. All of a sudden, she sees a baby floating in this basket. And she says, I must save him. She doesn't yet know who he is. What does she do? She extends her arm. But her arm doesn't reach. The Torah says so. So what does God do? He performs a miracle and he extends her arm beyond her reach so that she can finally grab the basket and bring the baby in the basket home. I find that image very powerful because often in life we want to achieve, we want to reach out, we also want to redeem the world. See, Peter Yeshua, we want to answer yes proudly to that question. But our arm doesn't reach. It simply doesn't reach. But if you just try and you keep that eye on the basket, who knows? God performs miracles. That happens each and every time. You can't lose sight. Your arm will be extended. And one of the most fascinating, maybe most awe-inspiring stories of the Olympics. No, it's not the story I know you're going to tell me. What do you think it is?
Jesse Owens.
Sorry?
Jesse Owens.
Oh, Jesse Owens. That's a very inspiring story. With Hitler, right? Yeah. I thought you were going to tell me Kerry Strug. Remember Kerry Strug in 1996? In the Atlanta Olympics? She lives in Tucson. You know that? She's Jewish and lives in Tucson and very involved in the community there. But it's another story where she broke her leg when she landed and she brought the medal home. But there's a story in 1968 about a man who's almost unknown. He was running for Tanzania. And in 1968, he had to run the 5,000 meter race. All of the runners are finishing the race. They're storming into the stadium where all the winner will be greeted and all the other runners will be greeted. But this man is nowhere to be found. His name was Stephen Akhwari. Stephen Akhwari is not in the stadium yet. People are starting to go home and he's still not in the stadium. He still hasn't finished the race. And after a few hours, they finally see him walking and limping into the stadium. His knee, there's images of that. But his knee was filled with blood and he can barely walk. But he's determined to reach the finish line. People try and help him, he refuses. Until he himself reaches that finish line. At the end, they ask him, but Mr. Akhwari, you lost the race anyway. Why do you keep running? Especially if you were so severely injured. And he answered so powerfully, he said, see, my country didn't send me here to begin the race. My country, Tanzania, sent me here to end the race. And that is what I ought to do. It's a man who, again, did not lose his focus. See, Peter Yeshua, did you await the redemption? Did you do anything? Yes, he walked step by step by step, never losing his sight on the finish line until he crossed it. We don't live just for ourselves. We live for our nation. We are representatives of our nation, each and every one of us. We are like limbs of the same body, as the Talmud says so many times. And each one has a task to do, and that task eventually helps our body, entire body, be redeemed. This is who we are. So if I may conclude just with an analogy that is found in the Midrash, an analogy that I found so beautiful, an analogy that speaks of a library. Imagine, the libraries are almost out of touch today because Borders went out of business and Barnes & Nobles is struggling. People don't read anymore. Maybe they just read electronically, I'd like to believe. So you have Kindle and you have others, but yeah, we don't read much. My children, unfortunately, don't read as much as I used to. And I don't read as much as my parents used to. I believe that too. But we don't read much. But imagine that you were in the library. And all the books, you were surrounded by books of all sorts of kinds. And then you see a book that bears the name of you. Same last name. You're attracted to it. You go, you take it out. That's what the Midrash says. You open, and on the first page it says your last name and your first name. The book of so-and-so. Move forward, flip the pages, and you see that the pages are empty. So you say to yourself, boy, for the sake of this library, I need to write something, I need to do something. But then they tell you, no, you don't need to write. You need to live the words that you wish to be written. That's the image of the Midrash when it comes to speak to our individual task versus the whole. Our library will never be complete if one of us here in this room leaves the pages of our books empty. Everyone is given a book to write, a unique story to author. And it depends on each and every one of us here whether we'll heed the call of those 4 questions, whether we'll be faithful to ourselves, whether we'll be consistent in studying Torah, connecting our minds with our values, whether we'll really be fruitful and multiply and have this impact on the world, and finally whether we'll never lose sight of that finish line, of the goal of redeeming the entire world simply by filling our own story. If we do so, in the library in its entirety, we'll gain the most beautiful book, but more importantly, we'll become once and for all wholesome. I think that as we approach Yom Kippur, we must be able to come forth and say not just yes to these 4 questions, but say, as we all know, Hineni to these 4 questions. You know, Hineni is a peculiar Hebrew word. It's a biblical one, but it's a very interesting one. Hineni is a combination of 3 Hebrew words. Hineni as the word I, Hineni as the word Hine, which means year, this moment, and Hineni, Hine can also mean now. I, the moment, now. I am completely immersed with this moment. I am completely hearing the call, and I will fill those empty pages to make not just my book full, but to make the entire library full. And I have to conclude with one last thing, but you know, the Kotzker Rebbe is one of my favorite Hasidic Rebbes. He was known to be a man of truth, and he wouldn't be shy to reproach people, even very harshly sometimes. A few examples I can give you, but I'm not going to deviate. But he was a man of truth. There's really no time and no space for superficiality. But when he passed away, people came to visit his students to comfort them. And his students would ask the question, what was the most important thing in the life of your rabbi? And they answered, well, we don't think there was such a thing. The same people asked the students, but one second, everyone has the most important things. For some people it's their spouse, for some people it's their studies, for some people it's their hobbies. What was the most important thing in his life? And the students again replied, there was no such thing. People asked, well, what do you mean by that? And the student said, it's very simple. You see, whatever a Rebbe did, at that moment, that was the most important thing in his life. Everything he related to as the most important thing in his life. And in a way, on Yom Kippur, we are asked to do the same thing, to shout this Hineni, to answer these 4 questions, by saying that now, as we live the moment right now, we are doing the most important thing in his life, in our life. And I can promise you that if we heed the call, and I include myself with you, then our nation will be better off, our world will be better off, but more importantly, the library of the Jewish people will continue to shine forth now and forever. I thank you. All right, we'll open it up to questions and answers. It doesn't have to be limited to those 4 questions, to the afterlife and so on, but it can be about anything. Don't ask me about, I'll say, don't ask me about cooking. Cooking, don't ask me about cooking. All right. About women's issues, I was going to say. That's for my wife. Okay. Anything? Yes, Louis.
Going back to Moses' original name, I don't know if the subject. What is his first name? What did it mean?
Yekutiel?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Yekutiel, apparently what his first name was, according to the Talmud, the name that his biological mother gave him. Yekutiel comes from the Hebrew root word kava, kuf vav he, which means hope. Hope. And that is because despite the trouble, she still had hope. And that's why she had that child. Having children is the greatest statement of hope. Good question, yeah? Anything else? Yes?
No, well, Louis says I should have a question.
I know she has a question.
No, well, here I go, stuttering and mumbling. If I had a question, it would be, quite honestly, where am I going to find this in writing? Because what you said was so profound as far as it affected me with these 4 things. I need to go home and look it up on the computer.
Where do you find the Talmudic discussion?
Yeah.
In the Tractate of Shabbat?
No, let's make it easy.
Tractate of Shabbat, now I'll tell you where. I believe page 122, somewhere around there. Tractate of Shabbat. See, those pages are full, they're not empty, so it's hard to follow up. But I think in the 120s. If you want, I'll email you the exact source.
You can write it down for me.
Are there 4 questions? Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Actually, we have a video here, and you can go and see it afterward. Thank you, Benny, for filming all this.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions? The question, yes.
I have a question.
Yes, go.
You talked about, like, were you true to yourself? And I think that is a very hard thing to figure out because there's so many different forces, internalized voices, should, so many different things to try to sort out. To figure out what is really, what do you call that, still small voice, or, speak to how you get there.
That's an excellent question. I think to be true to yourself necessitates, first of all, blocking off the outside sounds of life, outside voices, blocking off Facebook, Twitter, and those other things, even for a short while. Oscar Wilde famously said, Oscar Wilde, who was a Scottish author, famously said that we know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Very powerful line, but I think it pertains to our generation too. So we know the price of everything. But we know the value of things, including ourselves. We know our price, but do we know our value? Fortunately, not always. So how can we really know the value of ourselves? I think, to be very brief, the value of ourselves is divided into 4 separate categories. We have to know our personality, in other words, our skills, our talents. We really have to be in tune with that. Because what the gifts that God gives us, He gives them to us for us to use them, right? So if you gave us a special skill, whether it's music or art or sport or anything else, then we have to use them. That's number 1. But that also includes the moods of the person and to know how to channel them in the best of ways. Number 2, we have to be also in tune with the opportunities that we have. Opportunities that we have here in America are very different than the opportunities that people have in Africa. So God gives us opportunities each and every day, so we have to jump on those too. Number 3, the people that we meet, the people that we're surrounded with, especially the home like we spoke about before, I think that's part of who we are. and therefore we should do everything to cultivate those relationships. And number 4, the places that we find ourselves in, whether it's in the doctor's office stuck for half an hour, or stuck in traffic, or on a vacation in the Bahamas. Doesn't matter, but I think all the places that we go to and visit are a part of our purpose. There's a reason why we are there. We have to ask. It's beyond just sitting on the beach and dozing off. It's much more than that. But I will tell you a story that I think comes from Christian sources. Someone told me it comes from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, which I could believe too, because it's very much him to say so. But I couldn't find it. I looked everywhere in Rabbi Nachman's books, I couldn't find this. But there's a story about a fisherman. You know the story about the fisherman? Who was, that story, he was fishing fish, and someone comes to him and says, you know, you're wasting your time, you fish, and then you go and you sleep, and you go back, and you just fish for what you need. But if you would be a little more consistent, you could make millions. Man says, how so? He says, well, instead of sleeping, fish a little more, then you have more fish to sell. He says, okay, and then what? He says, you know that story? He says, and then what? He says, then you'll have your own store. He says, great, and then what? Then you have multiple stores, you'll have a whole chain of stores. He says, great, and then what? He says, then you'll have ships and planes, and great, and then what? He says, and then you'll be the most famous man in the world. This is great, and then what? He says, then you'll be able to sit on the beach. He says, what do you think I'm doing now? But it's the same idea. We run to all these different races. You know, someone clever also said that the problem with all these rat races is that even if you win them, you're still a rat. But it's the same thing. The question is, where am I taking my life to? Am I taking my life to that which is completely not me? And unfortunately, again, we have so many forces nowadays that lead us to being not ourselves, right? On Facebook, I'm not against Facebook. I think Facebook is good to share ideas, not to share people, but to share ideas. But on Facebook, or share events, not to share people. But on Facebook, you can design exactly how you wish to look like. If you have a picture of yourself you don't like, you don't post it. If you have a friend you don't like, you unfriend him. If you have a poke you don't like, you depoke it. You can do anything you want. In other words, you live in an illusionary world. A world that's not you. Because you is you with that freckle. You is you with that friend that you don't like. Don't run away from that. And it's true with Twitter. We waste our lives just thinking that we're the greatest heroes because we have 1,000 followers. And on video games, we think that we're the best quarterbacks in the world because we know how to play Wii well. We know how to play PlayStation well, so we're the greatest ninjas. But that's an illusionary world. That's not who we are. I think that's why those forces of the world very often deviate us from valuing ourselves, not putting a price on ourselves. And demands a lot of thinking, but I think thinking on those 4 planes. Yeah. Yes?
Could you just emphasize those 4 questions again?
The 4 Talmudic questions.
Yes.
Absolutely. Question number 1 is whether you were faithful in negotiation. That's the literal translation, but we said that means not just negotiations with others, but in negotiations with yourself. That's question number 1. Question number 2, whether you were consistent in Torah study. Question number 3 is whether you were fruitful and you multiplied. And question number 4 is whether you waited strongly or you did anything in order to usher in the redemption. Sure.
And those actually will get intertwined at the same time.
Yeah, they're all connected, no doubt. They're all interconnected. Yes?
What will you be talking about next time?
Oh, good question. Well, I live the moment so much that I lose sight of the goals. But I don't know. I really don't know. I have a few ideas that I'm playing around with. My main goal in life, really, my main goal in life, I'll share this with you confidentially. What happened in Vegas stays in Vegas. But it's really, I think that unfortunately, especially in the world I come from, the Orthodox world, sometimes the Torah is seen as outdated. And I like to make the teachings of Judaism, and if I condense my 2 goals into 2 words, is to make them relevant, and to make them accessible. So I can promise you that the next subject will, at least will try to make it relevant and accessible. Any other questions? So now it's my turn to ask you a question. I'll leave it to you for homework. But this whole base, the whole base of this talk was what the angel tells us in heaven. How do we know that he tells that to us? Has anyone visited heaven before and come back? How do we know that? Think about it.
Fifth question.
That's the fifth question. Good. Very good. That's it? Okay, so I really want to thank Amy and all those who helped put this together. Thank you very, very much. And thank you.
Please feel free to stay. We're bringing out some goodies from our Fair Cafe here. We got drinks, whatever. The room is ours for the evening. Thank you all for coming in. Go and register at meetup.com so you'll find out when the next event will be. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.